Good morning. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Greenwich Board of Selectmen. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As was indicated, it's a public meeting of the board, not a public hearing. There are copies of the meeting's agenda on the table, as well as a set of the items that are before the board for discussion or action today. Great, thanks. Item number 2 is to approve minutes. There are 2 sets of minutes, one from the regular meeting that was held on April the 6th. And I know that, where is he, Bob? Is Bob Brady here?
Yes. Yeah.
Bob, you indicated last evening to me that there was a correction you noted. I was looking for that.
I think it's it's the one that had the appointments to the Greenwich Housing Authority. There was 3, and then there was a 4th one underneath that was just appointed, but it didn't say the one.
Okay, so I was noting page 4, there is a correction, Barbara, to the 4th item down. Mr. Tone nominated, it's Alan Rossi versus Adam Rossi, so that was one. But moving up, we had Mr. Cardumi for reappointment. The appointment was unanimously approved, following a second by Mr. Toner. But Mr. Marzullo, the appointment was unanimously approved, following a second. Mr. DeFina.
Alan Rossi, that was
We got that one, but Mr. Brady had commented to me last night that there was an item that he looked at the minutes that he thought required correction as it related to the motion in the second.
I think you just need to name the board to which the person is.
Right, for Alan Rossi.
There's no board there.
Okay. Okay, that's on page 4. Are there any other corrections?
It was the Rossi nomination.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks. Are there any other changes?
No.
If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended from the April 6th?
So, second.
Okay, without objection. The next set is for the special meeting that was held on April 13th. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve those?
So move. Second.
Okay, without objection. Okay, under item number 3, first Selectmen updates. There's been a number of items quickly to run through. Several of them are reporting on events that have taken place, and then others are items that are currently in process. The first was that the town paid tribute to Joan Caldwell, the representative town meeting's moderator pro tem. That took place at the last meeting of the RTM. Of course, had the honor of paying tribute to Joan at her funeral several weeks ago. The Greenwich Historical Society has unveiled their new vision with a treasure trove of modern-day elements that illustrate all of the yesterdays on which Greenwich moved a step forward. The groundbreaking on April 9th for the expanded campus will include more educational and exhibition space, as well as improved handicap accessibility and parking at the Society's Vanderbilt Education Center. It is important to note that the town, through the Community Development Block Grant Program, has supported the handicap accessibility improvements, and it's over a 2-year allocation. But for those who are not familiar with the facility, I encourage them to become acquainted, because it's quite impressive how it brings forth really 3 centuries of the town's history in one campus. The Historical Society also recognized one of our town's outstanding volunteers, and that's the town's Ambassador at Large, Bea Crumbine. She was honored as their Volunteer of the Year, along with student volunteer Anna Heavey. Bea has done a remarkable job in fostering continued sister city relationships with Rose and Mora de Santos, Italy. I attended the Audubon of Connecticut Environmental Leadership Awards dinner. There were many local ties to this event. Melissa Grew, who was raised here in Greenwich, the daughter of Ann Sems, was the recipient of an award for her award-winning wildlife photography. And Leslie and Bill King from Old Greenwich and their company Back 40 Farm Group was also recognized for their gardening program, bringing sustainability into our community. The Greenwich Veterans Council met recently. Members and their respective organizations are working on a series of Memorial Day programs, as well as events for our veterans to be held in coming months. There will be information disseminated shortly as to those events. Many of them have been in existence for a while. Barbara, if you have questions, can answer as to the details. Also attended a lecture with historian and journalist Walter Isaacson, another Greenwich Historical Society program, discussing the digital revolution and how it impacts our society today. This past weekend, I attended the 35th Yamashoa commemoration organized by the UJA Greenwich. The speaker was a Holocaust survivor, Dr. Moshe Avital. Dr. Avital was riveting in his discussion on the Holocaust and how nearly his entire family was killed at various camps. He himself spent several years at Auschwitz and other camps before he was liberated from Buchenwald. For those who have never attended this type of program and commemorate this remembrance, I would encourage you to do so. It is some of the most emotionally, I don't know how to describe it. It's just overwhelming to hear the horrors and how people had to succumb to such horror. But those who survived really puts into perspective, I think, modern life in terms of people's issues with complaints and things. We really have nothing to complain about when you think about the pain and horror that someone endured like this. It's really, I think you went last year for me. It's very, very riveting and important for this community to support that remembrance ceremony. The Connecticut Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Aquaculture sent a letter acknowledging the work and expertise and assistance provided by members of the Department of Public Works, as well as the Shellfish and Conservation Commissions during the recent dye testing that was conducted from the Grass Island Wastewater Pollution Control Facility. The test will help to prove that we in Greenwich are doing many things right when it comes to pollution control. Our clean waters and the ability to harvest shellfish from the coastal beds are proof of the great work being done by the staff at the facility. When we last met for our special meeting on April 13th regarding the temporary road closure on River Road Extension for the emergency removal and installation of a new transformer by Eversource, we were expecting an update. We received that. Because of the work that is being done and the weather implicating the work, it has been extended through today, Thursday, April 27th. Talking about Eversource, Eversource is continuing to have discussions with the town about their proposal to put in a new substation down here in central Greenwich, as well as put in more modernized transmission lines. As we know, the town was successful in defeating Eversource's initial proposal at the Siting Council, docket 461. The instruction was for them to come back and work with the town to come up with an amenable solution. The town, through the Department of Public Works, the Planning and Zoning Director, Conservation, Parks and Trees have all been meeting with representatives, engineers on the subject, and with an outside pro bono consultant who's widely known in the industry, who's designed a solution that really fits the need of the town and the utility. That has been vetted. It has been, the concept has been produced. At the same time, Eversource is still continuing to advance their hybrid model. Their hybrid model essentially is to run overhead transmission lines down the Metro North Railroad line, installing 195-foot poles to carry the lines down here to central Greenwich. We have repeatedly shared with them the concerns with that, which go beyond just aesthetic. They directly conflict and jeopardize the town's force main sewer line, which runs from Coscob down to the wastewater treatment plant. So conceptually, if you can envision all of the town's wastewater coming from sanitary sewers from the east side of town, goes underneath the Coscob Harbor. That line, I believe, was fixed about a decade ago, I recall. Then comes out of there and runs right along the railroad line. Eversource's plans, and what they're still talking about, is to present to the Siting Council this proposal that has those overhead lines on stanchions that are right on top of our force main sewer line. I mean, it is insidious to think that this would be acceptable. So we are engaging the support of several of our officials, notably Senator Blumenthal, for whom I've spoken to and was instrumental in helping us the last time. Perhaps Attorney General Jepsen as well. This is just a depiction of it. And again, these are, to be fair, this is preliminary, but again, for lay people, it's important to see. If you were to look at, and I'm showing really you guys, but if you look at the railroad and you look at this, this is where the line is in
Two-story building.
Yeah, but the line is right under the foundation for these structures. So this is something that we've scheduled some meeting with residents to update them, particularly in the Kinsman Circle, Morningside Drive areas. They've been very interested and naturally about it. But stay tuned, there's going to be more to it. The real desire of the town is for the Eversource to withdraw application 461 and introduce a new application or docket with the proposal that we feel is more amenable and have that evaluated. What is driving them? It's what drives many things: money, cost. And we feel that their hybrid proposal hasn't had a true cost benefit, not just from dollars and cents, but from environmental impact to the town, particularly as it relates to the force main sewer. Commissioner Siebert is now engaging the Department of Justice, EPA, because we're under a consent decree to make certain amount of improvements. They need to be aware of what Eversource is contemplating. And I say contemplating because tomorrow, hopefully they can pull that. But right now, we're very skeptical and very untrusting of what their ultimate submission is. So stay tuned. It's a very, very important issue. Recently, at the request of the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the town's third-party risk analyst was asked to evaluate the current status of general liability exposures of the structure pier at the end of Steamboat Road. The review took place in late March of 2017, and the final report was recently received by the Department of Public Works. The report found that the current condition of the pier, quote, represents a serious loss potential to the general public, end quote. A major concern was no perimeter railing barrier, quote, to prevent someone from falling off the edge, end quote. Given the expressed concerns in the report, as well as the recommendations to address public safety, DPW is moving ahead to install a fence to close access to the pier. They plan that work ideally tomorrow or early next week, and it will remain closed until the repairs are ultimately done. I will say that it really emphasizes the importance of the budget appropriation that is before the RTM, that it be approved so that that particular asset can be retained. But given that this report was undertaken by BET, and actually, as I believe, before their audit committee, we now have a public document firmly highlighting the risk exposure to the town. So the commissioner in her capacity is now put in the position to have to take action to ameliorate that. Water conservation, I was going to report on a meeting that was held yesterday, but we are going to be delving into that more deeply later in the meeting. But I will tell you that while the reservoirs are at 98% here in Greenwich, 88% in Stamford, precipitation is 14% below normal for the past 12 months. It is beginning to trend as we go through the calendar and recalibrate the 12 months. It is trending in a positive direction. And the U.S. Seasonal Drought Outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center shows Connecticut with some areas drought remaining, but again, improving. So the overall focus of the towns in southwest Connecticut, working with Aquarian, working with the State Department of Health's Water Bureau, is to ultimately rescind the orders that were put in effect, but to not take finger off the pulse, because the situation last year about this time is we were also full, and throughout the summer with lack of precipitation, supplies dropped rapidly. And they drop rapidly because of the tremendous draw from irrigation, outside irrigation. So part of the discussion is about implementing more broadly than just Greenwich, of course, 2-day-a-week watering for outside irrigation. And that's something that I had asked the director of the Water Bureau, because once they rescind the order from the state, really you're operating under local provisions. Now, we happen to have a very strong ordinance on water conservation that was adopted in the early 80s. Not all the towns do. So there are provisions that give this board, but ultimately the director of health, to set some conditions. We are going to be discussing later in the meeting rescinding the current ban, but adopting this new protocol, which again is to move toward 2-day-a-week watering. And there are all and varied conditions that benefit or provide benefit to athletic facilities, golf courses, green industries like nurseries that will allow them to conduct their activities. So I want to be clear that this isn't going to be so draconian that it's going to jeopardize the viability of those assets. I think the conservation director, I'm looking for Denise.
She's over there in the corner.
Denise, I don't want to supersede you because I know you, but just to give, because all the audience might not be here at the end, and also for edification. But that was the discussion over in Stamford at the meeting, is how to, again, it's changing all of our behavior and thinking about water consumption. We sent a letter, I sent a letter to our federal officials concerning the continued funding for the Community Development Block Grant Program. Many of you may have heard that there has been proposed reductions to this long-established program. I believe it dates back to 1970s under the Nixon administration. And it's one of the federal government's more successful programs because it looks at data which allocates resources to targeted populations in communities and goes directly to those programs. I think we all recognize here in Greenwich, who are familiar with the program, the value that it has, the effectiveness that it has, and the necessity it provides to several of our non-for-profit organizations. The letter was sent to our Congressman, Jim Himes, as well as our 2 U.S. Senators, and included backup information in testimony from several of our not-for-profits who received support. Those include the Child Guidance Center, the Community Health Centers, Inc., the Food Bank of Lower Fairfield County, the Greenwich Historical Society, Kids in Crisis, River House, and the YWCA of Greenwich, among many. So as you can see, their testimony sent with the letter that I drafted, ableist also, represents support for people across the spectrum of life. And I think it's important that we universally champion CDBG, because it's been a value to this town now for 40 years. Several of us were at the Budget Overview Committee meeting of the RTM's workshop on Tuesday night. There was a very comprehensive presentation made looking at the town's current year proposed budget as well as future forecasts. I have to say that I thought their presentation was fair and balanced, as it acknowledged the work not only of the town administration but of the BET, and I was pleased to see them respect the efforts that have been made. It does also call for other steps, which I think will be debatable amongst all the various bodies as to the degree. But for the first time, I sense there was perhaps a greater synchronization of the issues in understanding, and which I think is a testament to everyone involved. And I see Mr. Raymer here, and I don't know, other BET members, and Mrs. Moriarty, and really all the BET and Board of Ed. I mean, I think this is the first time, Ms. Erickson, Ms. Applebaum, everybody, I think, Mr. Turner, how are you? You're the freshest, newest face, I have to think. But you all were there. I think most of you were there. I just thought, this was a positive meeting. I was proud of our town when we see like a civil, thoughtful presentation. Now, I was not there last night, and I know you were, and thank you for standing up for some things, Mr. Raymer. But it's a testament, I think, to the town that we're able to get together and discuss something as important as the budget and the merits of it. So stay tuned. I know that the meetings will begin next week for the committees on Monday and Tuesday, the districts on Wednesday and Thursday, culminating with the ultimate vote on May 8th. For those who are in the audience who are getting acclimated to local government, I would encourage you to attend the May 8th meeting, if not the committee meetings before, because really the decisions that are made there really determine the operations of the town for the next fiscal year. I mean, they have significant impact. So they're the final say, RTM. So received a nice letter from David Ormsby, who is a chairman of the Friends of the Nathaniel Witherell Board of Directors, thanking the board, thanking me, thanking the members of the board for their support for Project Renew, and providing what I think is a very appropriate report to the contributors of the Friends, bringing to culmination the completion of Project Renew. It's a very well laid out and justifiable information piece as to what has been accomplished, and I would encourage those who are not familiar with Witherell and want to know what's happened to read this pamphlet. It puts a bright, positive spotlight on the Nathaniel Witherell Skilled Nursing Facility. Last few items, we had a presentation of from the Economic Advisory Committee of a potential firm that would conduct the public relations campaign for the town. The firm's name is Lou Hammond. She came out for 45 minutes to an hour to explain the work that she's done in other domiciles, places like New Haven, Charleston, South Carolina, Norfolk, Virginia. Clearly, the information she provided talked about, sewing together all the various attributes of a community. And I think we know that. I mean, I think we know that we have a great community with things like the Historical Society, like the library, the schools, the hospital, the museum, but is there a coordinated message that brings together all of those positive attributes and not just tells us about it, we know it, we know about our town, but to the outside world? And given the advent of the digital age, the firm really is focused on targeting audiences beyond our borders and then trying to measure what has been the outcome over a year. So in all candor, when you undertake an initiative like this, it's not a one-year initiative, it's a multi-year initiative, and I think it's important to be forthright and tell people that. Now, as many know here, you gentlemen and the BET and those who listen, we're requesting $30,000 of town funds to work with about $70,000 to $80,000 of community funds from organizations like the Greenwich Association of Realtors, who has committed $15,000 predicated that the town supports it. Should the town not support it, I hope the initiative goes forward, but then the town, when I say the town, I mean us, doesn't really have a seat at the table. Meaning, if we're not putting forward any funding, then we really don't have the say. It's the people who represent the various organizations who do. I just was on a phone call with a gentleman from the Hartford Courant on another subject, and he was aware we were undertaking this, and he thought it was actually a very good idea. And the whole underlying premise is we can't rest on our laurels. We need to be proactive and accentuate the positive about Greenwich. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens on May 8th. You know, I applaud the people who have volunteered their time to push this. They're volunteers like most people in the audience, and I thank them for that because they don't have to do it, but they choose to do it. Finally, parking services. Many are aware of recent incidents. In the fall of 2016, routine follow-up work associated with an internal audit of the Department of Parking Service Operations identified a pattern of significant and ongoing fraud. Detailed work by the town's internal audit staff identified Michael Gordon as responsible for thousands of dollars of fraudulent transactions and hundreds of instances of false accounting entries in municipal records. The circumstances was referred to members of the Greenwich Police Department for criminal investigation. During the course of that investigation, members of the Greenwich Police Department were witness to and recorded and collected evidence of numerous instances of criminal conduct on Mr. Gordon's part during working hours when he was employed by the town of Greenwich. Members of the Greenwich Police Department identified more than one fraudulent scheme in operations over months wherein Mr. Gordon diverted municipal funds of the town of Greenwich for his own personal profit. The value of the fraudulently diverted funds in the last few months alone is known to have been in the tens of thousands of dollars. Members of the Greenwich Police Department have indicated that the Department of Human Resources has indicated to the Department of Human Resources that Mr. Gordon was in possession of a large amount of evidence implicating him directly and indirectly in criminal activity while at work, with the town of Greenwich itself as the victim. This evidence includes, but not limited to, numerous video records made over the course of months of customer transactions at Mr. Gordon's workstation during working hours that were later determined to be fraudulent. Numerous computer records made over months in Department of Parking Service software accounting systems that reflect transactions made as part of the criminal scheme to defraud the municipality, and hundreds of written records completed by Mr. Gordon at work in his own handwriting that reflect false entries into municipal bookkeeping records. Members of the Greenwich Police Department have reported to the Department of Human Resources that when Mr. Gordon was questioned about this criminal conduct on Monday, April 17, 2017, he confessed to having been involved in many instances of theft of cash from the municipality and false entry into records of the municipality, in furtherance of his larcenous schemes during the course of his employment for a period of well over 1 year. Accordingly, the town took steps to terminate Mr. Gordon's employment. As required by the collective bargaining agreement with Greenwich Municipal Employees Association, Mr. Gordon's union, a pre-disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Monday, April 24th, 2017. Prior to that hearing on Friday, April 21st, 2017, Mr. Gordon submitted a letter of resignation from his position of Accounting Clerk 2 in the Parking Services Department of the town of Greenwich. This truly is a unfortunate and sad set of circumstances. Anytime anyone in a position of trust violates that trust. I thought it was important in not only addressing it today, but a couple weeks ago, to communicate to all of our in-town employees the significance and seriousness of this incident, but to also acknowledge to them that this is in many ways an anomaly. This is not the standard here in the town with our public employees committing violations in theft like this. And I thought it was important to reaffirm to them that while this certainly brings a negative connotation to not only the individual, but people reading it, that not all employees are viewed that way. So again, thanks to all of the people involved in this investigation, notably the internal audit arm of the Department of Finance under the BET, the Greenwich Police Department, and frankly the staff who had to endure their own investigation, commentary, and work with that going on. More to come, but I want to just acknowledge the good work that those folks did. I think that concludes. Sure, we're ready.
I just wanted to update the Board of Selectmen on the Commission on Aging's age-friendly initiative with the AARP. Yesterday, there was a meeting of the Commission and the Columbia Consulting Group from Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health presented to the Commission the methodology that should be used in going forward. I stole 2 copies for you guys.
Oh, thank you. Be careful using the word stole after what I just said.
And it outlines just where they're going and what they have to do. They have to set up a committee. They have to set up subcommittees to look at various aspects of the town of Greenwich and how they can be made more age-friendly. I don't think they did this at the original meeting that we had. They're also striving to make Greenwich more dementia-friendly. So if you look on the last page, you can see the timeline that the Commission on Aging has in order to fulfill all of the requirements of the AARP program. It's a very ambitious timeline. They have to present their plan. It doesn't have to be implemented, but they have to present their plan by December 2018, and there's a lot of work to be done. But they were very emphatic in asking for the 2 of yours support.
Thank you, John. And certainly we support the commission in their efforts. Again, another example of an actionable item that can be promoted through our overall marketing and about what's great about Greenwich is appealing to the cross-section of lifespan from the millennials right up through those in their golden years.
Pat Burns, when they received the final report from the Columbia Consulting Group, is going to make an appointment to come and see you. And she's very anxious to talk to your economic board for this very reason.
Great. Thank you. I think that's just one other acknowledgement. We did receive a memo from our Deputy Commissioner of Public Works. We have been receiving a considerable number of not only emails, but we've had meetings about traffic issues in the Port Chuck and North Port Chuck Road areas. Very impassioned, pleased to undertake some corrective action. Jim Michael, the Deputy Commissioner of Public Works, has employed not only his staff, but availed himself to a road safety audit program through the University of Connecticut Technology Transfer and Center Safety Circuit Rider. And so, not to get in and read it all, they just received this last night, but I just want to acknowledge in a public forum that there is a prescriptive course of action. It's very tedious because it requires not only doing assessment, traffic counts, and monitoring, then you have to evaluate the solution, and then it has to ultimately get approved by the State Traffic Commission. So, not the most expeditious process, but one that is required. So you gentlemen were copied on it as well.
Right.
And and the board is the traffic authority. So we'll have to come back to this at some point, but progress is being made.
But this is a town-wide problem. Cognywog, Cat Rock, the request for a speed limit change on Old Stone Bridge Road, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, this one, you're right. This one had to do with a concern about cut-through traffic and routing using Waze and Google Maps. And again, I think we talked about the digital age earlier, about, think about how technology is making it easier for people to get information, and in this case, routing people through these rural, I would describe them as rural routes to get places, and that's really what the neighbors have expressed concern about, so stay tuned. Okay, the next item, that concludes the updates. The next item under old business is an item that's been with us for a while. It's the proposed charter revision changes to the Board of Education election process. So the legal department has been...
Before you start, I do have a question, please.
Yes, state your name. State your
My
name.
name is Sandy Litvak, I'm a resident of Greenwich. Because so many of us feel so strongly and brought signs, and since I'm unaware of where the rule is that says we cannot show those signs, could you please just tell us
Sure.
where that rule is?
The rule is in that this is a public meeting, it's not a public hearing, and as chairman of the meeting, in following Robert's rules and decorum, I determine the conduct at the meeting. So,
Because you just made that up just now.
no, I'm following Robert's rules. We live in a civil society. We run our government by Robert's rules. Typically, if this were a meeting of the board, we would not be facing this way. We would be at a table and we would be meeting. Because the room is constituted this way, many people think that it's like a public hearing. We are talking, but we're really talking amongst ourselves because we're deliberating. So that is a right of the chair to determine the conduct and decorum in the room. And that's how we've done it in Greenwich for as long as I've been involved, and I intend to keep it that way.
Has this issue arisen before?
Very sporadically. I think when we had issues with cell phones, towers, people brought signs and the same comment was made, because we're here to have a discourse. We're not here for theatrics.
This is not theatric, this is an expression in a free society of how the public
Correct.
feels.
And yes.
You are entitled to make your ruling.
Right.
I understand it.
Well, thank you. And we have expression by having public hearings on subjects, and there was one on this. So the item on the agenda is a continuation of one that's been with us for some time. A committee gave a report on the subject several weeks ago. The town attorney's office has taken the report and drafted language that effectuates what that report is recommending. It involves Section 38 of the town charter. And essentially, it's changing the methodology and how the Board of Education is constituted. Since receiving this document from the town attorney and the accompanying chart that goes with it, which explains how this would be effectuated if, in fact, the RTM were to act upon it, a subsequent question has been posed to me by the current chairman of the Board of Education that has to do with the fact that this particular change, unlike changes that would take place affecting the Board of Selectmen, the representative town meeting, and the Board of Estimate and Taxation, if adopted by the RTM, would not in fact go to referendum. And that particular language occurs in Section 66 of our town charter, mandatory referendum and approval. Given the seriousness, or I'm going to say the seriousness, it's more than just serious. Given the interest, the importance, I think many people feel strongly about it. The chair feels like, and I'm paraphrasing what he communicated to me, that this is an issue that should ultimately be decided by the public. But we don't make that determination fully. The RTM ultimately, and I come back to what I said earlier about even the budget, the RTM ultimately decides things in this town. So, two courses of action. One, if this board were to affirmatively move the proposal to the RTM would have to adopt the change by a simple majority, 116 votes. That would be final, versus if the RTM were to and we were to initiate a discussion about this, amend Section 66 of the charter, send that to the RTM. The RTM would answer the question first, do they want the voters to ultimately decide this? So in light of that interest on the part of, now this was brought forward by the chair of the Board of Ed, although I happen to subscribe to the fact that I think ultimately the citizens should vote on this, we would not act on this today, and we would contemplate a discussion on amending Section 66 of the charter, which would include the Board of Education as another town entity or body for which any changes to its existence, mode of selection, composition, rights, powers, privileges would have to be voted upon by the public. So that is what Mr. Fox has explained to me as that question came forward. I happen to think there's merit to that, looking at that. What it would require is this body to, one, not deal with it today, because it's not, frankly, that section is not with us today. Section 38 is. And at another meeting, discuss the merits of doing that, having a committee established, it could be the existing committee or a new one, examine that question, present a finding, come back to us with a recommendation, we consider it, and then we move it to the RTM. The RTM could choose to do nothing with it. They can choose to adopt it. If they adopted it, and Wayne, this is where if you can opine, if the RTM adopted a change to Section 66, which would then affirmatively say they would like the Board of Education to be included in this section, any change to that has to be approved in a referendum? So the real question is, requiring changes to the Board of Education before a referendum, does that have to go to a referendum?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you all. I'm glad you started off with the easy questions, Peter. I think you have accurately portrayed the issue that is before your body today. Under what has been done previously by your committee and by my department, you have before you a proposal which would carry out the wishes and the suggestions of that body. You have the right today to vote on it if you deem it appropriate. Since that time, and very recently, a new issue has arisen as to whether or not we want to consider the possibility of amending Section 66. That's a new concept. It is different from what was considered by your committee. There has been no public input on it. There has been no public hearing on it. There's been no debate on it. So if, in fact, one chose to go down that road, and I certainly respect your decision not to act on that today, but if one chooses to go down that road, I think that's a whole new concept with a whole new committee, i.e. maybe the same individuals, but it's a whole new review process to determine whether or not that is something which this community wishes to do. Now, the specific question you raised is whether or not that issue would have to go to a referendum. Under existing Section 66, it provides that no home rule action which would affect the existence, mode of selection, composition, rights, powers, privileges, or duties of the representative town meeting, the Selectmen, or the Board of Education and Taxation shall become effective until and unless such action is approved at a referendum. The question would be whether or not, if you chose to amend Section 66, does that affect the power of the RTM? I tend to think it would, because what would otherwise be a final action of the RTM would now require action of the RTM and a referendum. So, and Gene McLaughlin and I have debated about this today. I tend to think that if, in fact, you're going to change 66 to take away or modify or affect some of the power of the RTM, that issue in and of itself most likely would have to go to a referendum.
So essentially you're talking about a several-year process. I mean, if you think about it.
Keep in mind that under the proposal that is before you today, you're talking about affecting the elections in 2019. This process could take several years if, in fact, you added that to the issues before the board, yes.
So if that's the decision to not take action today, which I'm not for taking action today because I ultimately like the idea that Peter has proposed, which is that this should be before a referendum. anything to do with the Board, anything to do with the Board of Ed, put it to a referendum. That means we'd have to just focus on a whole new section with a whole existing group or a whole new group. So you're talking,
It's a new issue, it's a new concept, it's something you would have to start anew to consider. Yes, sir.
so that's how I feel. How do you feel about?
Okay, can I?
Sure.
Okay. Before I get into the merits of this, I have some prepared remarks and a lot to say. For more than a year, the Board of Selectmen has engaged in dialogue about bringing forth change to the Greenwich Charter, specifically in regards to Board of Education election reform. After much discussion and testimony and feedback, opinions from both sides, I have yet, even today, and weeks prior, I have yet to hear how such a change that has the possibility of unforeseen consequences, negative unforeseen consequences, how such change will positively impact the district, increase testing scores, make kids safer, how such change will impact those most affected. The proponents of this rely on a false notion that changing the charter will result in greater voter choice, but offering no explanation as to how this change will result in what is best for the children of Greenwich Public Schools. This change, if implemented, will result in empowering the two political parties even more. And I want to say that again. This change, if implemented, will result in empowering the two political parties even more. It will isolate even further independents wanting to seek political office, and it will actually diminish the quality of candidates during the search pool. While I fully acknowledge the state of education is one of politics, especially on the national level, Greenwich has a system in place, a balanced Board of Education who has worked well, personalities aside, forcing consensus. It is a system that is dependent on open dialogue and requires Democrats and Republicans to reach decisions that are in the best interests of over 10,000 or just under 10,000 young ones. If this change does occur and the Board of Education becomes one-party rule, expect greater dysfunction and expect partisan politics to infiltrate an area of Greenwich town government that for decades has been immune. Let me be clear, as a Democrat, as one of the leaders in the Democratic Party, I am not against this charter change because I fear such change will automatically result in Republican-controlled Board of Education. No, actually, I don't at all. The qualified, passionate candidates that we put up as Democrats will competitively challenge our Republican friends. My objection is about trying to preserve a system that allows for more cohesiveness in such a political world. I respectfully ask my two colleagues to minimally once again table this vote today. Now, with the introduction of this new plan, I don't know. I would suggest before we even get that far that we involve the League of Women Voters for a study to report back to us in regards to that before voting on whether or not this should go to referendum or not. I have concerns about both referendum versus the RTM. I have to give that more thought. If this were to be a 2-1 vote, strategically from the person on the other side, how will I to educate and we need an education process. If this were to ever go to referendum, there has to be an education process in place that the voter knows what they're voting about. Will this be a local election referendum versus a state election? So I have questions. So minimally, before we even consider that, I would respectfully ask the chair to involve the league to opine on pretty much every charter change I think that has been brought of this significant impact.
Thank you. Your remarks will be appropriate at the time if ever Section 38 gets to a vote. In terms of the league, we've worked with the league on many things. They're certainly open to take up the question. Again, it's dependent upon their leadership. The last leadership that I worked with was very bipartisan in not only their identity, but in their action. I hope that continues with the current group, although I have to say I'm not as confident of that based upon some of the programs I've seen. But in terms of next steps, essentially the next step really would be at another meeting to determine if, in fact, as you said, a committee should be established to look at that question. Clearly, we would want to talk to the RTM moderator about it because this is now a different question. Certainly involve the league if they're interested. I know they're working on the RTM governance right now. So I don't have any more to say, although I do think it's a misnomer to say that the current system is not partisan when it's made up of 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. By virtue of it's partisan. I mean, people use partisan like it's a dirty word. Unfortunately, national and state give it that dirty word. That's why I think it's important in Greenwich that we set our own standard, that we can have divergent points of view. We don't have to question the motives of people, that people just have different points of view, and you follow a prescribed process to allow people to express those and let matters be adjudicated. Ultimately, in America, I'd like to still believe idealistically that people get to decide, the citizens get to decide, and essentially that's what we're focused on in terms of our process. We decide to initiate an idea. The ultimate decision now with this was the RTM, but we're now going one step further and saying, you know what, the RTM's great, they're a good barometer on the town, but something of this importance, let the voters decide, cast your ballot, and if the voters say they want the status quo, great, hooray, then it's decided. So I think we got a good system, we just need to trust our system and follow our long-established methods and decorums for adjudicating matters in Greenwich.
See, now I'm concerned, now this is where, now Wayne, I have a couple questions and a concern. If this were to, my concern though, in terms of strategically on my part, was whether or not at this point I want it to go to the RTM versus the voter. My concern in terms of a referendum, if you follow out the process, when is the earliest time this can go in front of the voter? Would that be an off-year election, versus a presidential election versus a state election? Because this is, I say that because you're talking a difference of, on average on a local election, 14,000 voters to 30. This has significant impact too when this will go on. Because correct me if I'm wrong, when you say referendum, it'll have to go on a November ballot, correct?
Either a November ballot or a special election.
Okay. So a November ballot. So the earliest time, once again, if this were to go, when?
Well, let's assume you decide to go with the new concept. You would have to get that, in my opinion, have a committee appointed, have that reviewed, have that discussed, probably have a public hearing, have that debated, and then it would be back to you folks to make a determination as to what, if anything, you wish to do with it. If, in fact, you wished to pursue it, then you would forward that to the RTM for its approval. Assuming the RTM approved it, it would then go to a referendum depending upon when they did that and when the next election happened to be scheduled.
So okay. So the question the RTM is going to be faced with, they're going to be voting on whether or not they want to bypass them for a vote to opine this and go directly to the people?
In the new concept, that would be one of the issues before them. That is correct.
Wayne, would they really be bypassing, or they would be having to vote up or down on whether to change the section? That would allow the citizens to do it. Do you know what I'm saying?
They could interpret it in many different ways. I think the specific technical issue for them is whether or not, if in fact you're going to change the makeup of the Board of Education, that issue has to go to a referendum. That's the decision that they would make. That would be the section of our charter, Section 66, that they would be asked to consider.
But the result would be they would have they would be voting on the change, but the result will be they're not going to be voting on the concept or what's before them in terms of the question, whether or not they want charter change. Correct?
That would be correct.
They wouldn't, yeah, good point. They're not voting on, Section 38 is essentially
That would be off
put
the table
aside.
initially. That would be correct.
So that whole amendment would be put aside while the fundamental question of should any change affecting the Board of Ed go to a referendum?
The fundamental question would be how the process would work. Now we have a mandatory referendum on certain concepts if we're changing the powers of certain boards. This would add to that by putting the Board of Education in that mix. So if there was a change in the power structure or functioning of the Board of Education and the charter were adopted as proposed, that would have to go to referendum.
Why would, I'm not asking, it's rhetorical. Why would the RTM, the legislative body, sort of kick, they are the body of the people, representing the people that are, I don't know. When was the last time this was done in terms of just bypassing the RTM and going right to the people?
I'd have to go back and check to see when this was amended. I'm not sure, Drew, off the top of my head.
The last referendum on a subject was the budget changes in 2003.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And just my last question, in terms of the sooner, once again, if this were to happen, when is the earliest this can be? It won't, obviously, this year or next year. When will this come in front of
Well,
the people?
theoretically,
Yeah.
I think depending upon how quickly this board acts, depending on how quickly a committee acts, depends on how quickly it gets to the RTM, theoretically, I think this issue could get to the RTM probably in September, or its September meeting, thereabouts. I think they could take an action, and then it would have to, assuming it was adopted, it would then have to go to a referendum at the next election, probably not until the following November.
Okay.
So you're talking 2018.
I think that's a reasonable expectation, yes, sir.
So, okay, so Mr. Chairman, so the options that are going to be before us at some point, just so I can, is number one, we table this indefinitely. I mean, number two, goes to the RTM for a vote, or number three now, goes to the RTM for them to vote on a referendum. Are those the options before us?
Well, today, the option is, if you like Section 38, you want to move Section 38, you can do that. I'm saying I'm not doing that based upon the question that, do we want to entertain changing 66 and sending that to the RTM, for the RTM to decide if, in fact, they believe something of this importance with the Board of Ed should be approved through a referendum. So essentially, today we have either act on 38 or not, then there's nothing else to do.
Could the RTM then kick this back to us and say that they want to take this up? I mean, them, not as referendum, but to take it up.
I don't follow your question.
Could they take up Section 38, I think was
Yeah.
what Drew was saying.
Could they-
Could they just say, well, the selectmen, you didn't want to take it up because you
No.
want to do this, but we're
They
going
could
to.
not do that without you taking action to get it to them. That's how the process
They
would
can't have a
work.
sense of it, they can,
They can pass a sensitive
Yeah,
meeting
okay.
resolution for
All right.
what it's worth, which has no binding authority.
okay.
They can't take it up legally without it coming from you.
Okay.
The question for you to decide today, in my humble opinion, is number one, do you want to decide on what is before you?
What?
Or in light of this new issue that has been raised, do you want to take some additional time to consider that possibility and the ramifications thereof?
Well, obviously, I mean, I've been very forthcoming. I mean, I obviously want this tabled indefinitely. However, now that, I now have to, I need to think about strategically in terms of point A to point B, assuming there will be a 2-1 vote at some point, whether it goes to the RTM now or to the people. So that's how I feel. So.
Do you have anything you'd like to say?
No, just that I appreciate my two colleagues' comments.
Thank you. And we appreciate yours, John.
And I certainly would be in favor of tabling this for the time being and looking into the other path to take.
Okay, so Wayne, so the action that was proposed, the change, it's on the agenda as old business.
You can simply take no action on it if you wish.
Now, the question becomes to discuss this other item, the next meeting, if we want to follow the same process, which is we had a meeting, we had people selected to go and research the question, hold meetings, come back and report. You're advising, just to be clear, we follow that same process,
That is my advice, yes, sir.
which took, 16 meetings they had on that. But that was getting into researching like different methods. This to me is more of a fundamental direct question.
This is much more limited, much more limited in terms of the process. In my opinion, it probably would not take as long or as many meetings or be as complicated as the one that was previously discussed and voted on by the committee.
If just through the chair, and the Board of the charter states that the Board of Selectmen, either selectman like John or I, germane to business, we can bring something on, put something on the agenda. My question to you is, if I conclude, from now until our next Board of Selectmen meeting, that I do want to put this back on the agenda to vote and force a vote to bring this to the RTM.
The Section 38 section
Yes,
reference you're
yeah,
talking about.
strategically, and I have to think about this. Look, let's face it, I'm trying to get an end result that is what I think is correct. I can bring this up through the chairman and put this back on then for next Board of Selectmen meeting, correct?
I think the existing provisions allow you to do that, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Great, Wayne, thank you. Thank your office for the multitude of questions that come up, some of them impromptu, non-scheduled walk-in. What do we do with this? So thank you. I want people to realize the importance that you play and that you're having to respond to dozens of people, both internally within the building, within the various boards. There's 12 people on the BET, 230 RTM members, and we've only got how many attorneys? 7? So I think it's important for people to recognize, because these are not simple questions. They're not something that they could just give an answer. There's a lot of research, so thank you. That concludes the item under old business. The Housing Authority,
Feel free to stay, everybody.
the Housing Authority
Don't all exit.
is presenting, do you have overheads or anything?
No, we're not.
I don't think there's a need to, but,
There was a motion, I thought, to table the matter. I don't believe you've taken a vote on that motion.
no, I didn't hear it, but I'll be willing to entertain it. You didn't, did you make a motion to?
Move to table this item?
John did.
You want to move to table it?
Yes.
Is there a second?
There is.
Seconded by Mr. Marzullo. Discussion? Is Mr. Fox, question for you. A motion to table, what are the consequences of that?
Stays on the table.
I just want it to be clear, though, for the record.
Silence. Quiet.
Under Robert's rules, I would not move to table it indefinitely. A motion to table it indefinitely can be interpreted to have the consequences of killing it under Robert's rules. So I would simply vote to take no action on the issue at this time.
I can make this easier for you. Instead of John, you want me, I will do that if you want.
So
Okay,
is that your intent?
Yes.
So is there a withdrawal of the
This
motion
time.
to table?
I make a motion, withdraw that motion.
Okay.
And make a motion to
Take no action
take no action on this item at this time.
at this time. That would be the more appropriate procedural posture to take.
Okay, we'll vote on that, obviously.
Okay, so, John, your motion is to what? Say.
Take no action at this time on the proposed charter revision.
Okay, to move. Is there a second? There's no second.
And
what-
I would like to make a motion too.
I have a
then.
question for you. What's the difference between to make a motion to table, or what did you say, to postpone,
Not take any action.
to not take any action, then just,
Motion to
it's
table.
not doing anything, just leaving it there?
Then you can do that also.
I mean,
My
are they the
concern-
same?
They're not the same. My concern is that if you move to table it indefinitely, under Robert's rules, that has been interpreted to mean that you're killing the concept. I don't think it is the wish of this body to do that. I think it is the wish of this body to postpone it to another date, or postpone it to another time, or simply to take no action. I think you can decide, if there's no motion to approve it or reject it, I think you can simply let it sit there and take no action on it and let it go at that without the formal motion. But I'm advising you against a motion to postpone indefinitely.
Okay.
Thank-
What is your motion again?
It's just a withdrawal.
But let's repeat it again, because Barbara needs, the motion, just want to be clear what it was, what you,
Move to take no action at this time.
I think that is appropriate and acceptable procedure.
okay.
Mr.
So you
Chairman,
made-
though, with all
You
the-
made a motion to.
Point of order, though. Point of order. I think we have to first vote. I mean, he has to withdraw the original motion, though.
I did.
He did.
So did we vote on that?
No.
No.
Okay, so you withdrew your original motion.
Right.
Which was to postpone indefinitely, or to table the motion. You withdrew that.
Right.
It was, you seconded it, right, originally?
I second it for discussion. Yes. I'll discuss it. I'm not going to vote on it, but yeah. I can
Okay,
go for
so
it.
now you're withdrawing it. So you're saying there needs to be a vote to withdraw?
I don't think there needs to be a vote to withdraw unless there's an objection to it. So I simply, if he wishes to withdraw his motion and there's no objection, it's withdrawn.
So he withdrew it. So then
That's done.
So then he clarified and you made a motion to
Take no action.
take no action.
You can go through that formality if you wish.
No, okay.
So he's made so you're making the motion to take no action.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
All right, I will second the motion to take no action now that I clearly understand the consequences of it.
Now you are entitled to vote on that.
So discussion and then vote.
If there's a discussion, yes.
So is there any discussion? So all in favor of the motion to take no action, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
One. So, Mr. Chairman, then I would like to another amendment to actually table this indefinitely. So that I'm actually repeating what my colleague, Mr. Turner, said originally. So my motion is to table this indefinitely.
Okay, is there a second? No. So it rests with a vote to take no action,
Correct.
and it stays on the agenda if someone wants to bring it.
Stays before the board. Whether it goes on the agenda or not is something to be discussed amongst the group at a later time.
Got it. Thank you for your parliamentary guidance. Thank you. Okay, sorry, Housing Authority. You've we're patient.
Thank you, Mr. Raymer.
That was good.
Thank you.
I'm staying.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, gentlemen,
Very- okay,
ladies. I'm here this morning.
Anything controversial?
Thank you and goodbye. Is this something I said? I'm here this morning to give the Board of Selectmen an update on the ongoings of the Housing Authority. We've been very active, very busy. This morning I have our Executive Director with me, Anthony Johnson, and our Deputy Director, Terry Mardullo. You have a packet that we prepared for you. Basically, it's the mission of the Housing Authority on the first page, and the Housing Authority was created in 1946 with its original purpose to house returning war veterans. And I might say in my district, there's still some of those war veteran homes on Riverside Lane that have been turned into mini mansions. So there's been I guess, a evolution on those homes. Currently, the Housing Authority owns and manages 872 units and 343 Section 8 vouchers for a total of 1,215 properties that we manage. And most of you have been in town all your lives, like myself, are pretty familiar with the different locations of our properties. But more importantly is that we've taken an aggressive role in the past 5 years to renovate, upgrade, and make some more substantial changes to our residential units. We have done major upgrades right across the street that you can look out your windows here at Town Hall and see Greenwich Close, which has 130 units and 17 units of affordable housing in that property. And we've put in millions of dollars in upgrades and renovations, and we've given you some nice scenery to look at with a real garden in the front and face facades. And we continue to pump in more money into that facility. On one of the pages, you see the total revenues that updated unaudited financial data on the Housing Authority, and residential services that we provide on the following page, and community garden that we have at Armstrong Court for residents, and if there's any space available for non-residents to apply for a garden. You can see in 2013 the number of projects that we have undertaken at Armstrong Court, McKinney Terrace, Greenwich Close, and the tens of millions of dollars that have gone into these projects over the last 5 years. And it goes on to even the new properties that we purchased and upgraded and renovated on Strickland Road, which was I think one of our first initiatives to start creating some new housing in the town of Greenwich. And we're all proud of that. And I have to tell you, though, with the staff and the management of the Housing Authority, we've been able to keep our costs down and spend each and every one of our dollars wisely. And what comes with a good organization is good people working for it. And I can't speak enough to the employees of the Housing Authority and the dedicated service that they give us in the town of Greenwich and the residents. So I give my hats off to them. Also, you'll see on in the packet, Quarry Knoll 2. We did a major upgrade of Quarry Knoll 2, which I believe, Tony, we had got an award for that, didn't we?
We did. A national award from NARO.
A national award for NARO on that one, and there's some before and after photos of Quarry Knoll 2. Armstrong Court Playground, you see that we've done some major changes there at the playground. You'll also notice on the page the projects that we completed in 2015, just going back on the things that we have done. Projects that we completed in 2016, and one of the major ones that we did in 2016, well, actually, it was several. The Armstrong Court and the Adams Garden. Adams Garden, we did a major renovation and upgrades of all of the kitchens. It was 80 kitchens that we wound up putting in real wood cabinets. I believe they were cherry cabinets, and granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. So that was a major upgrade. We also gave them a new wood flooring in the kitchens also. Armstrong Court, we did a big major boiler upgrade, and that's not completely finished because we're doing the laterals and distribution of that. So we've been active, and you'll see the Adams Garden kitchens before and after in your packet there. Also, the Greenwich Close that I mentioned to you before, the upgrades and the garden that we put in. And you're all welcome to go there and have lunch in the afternoon there when the weather gets nice. So those, and then some of the projects that we completed, McKinney Terrace 1, Town Hall Annex, and Wilbur Peck. Now, Tony, you want to get up here, and we're going to be talking about projects moving forward. And this is where I really want to make some emphasis to the board on the projects that we're going to be, projects that we're going to be trying to undertake, and providing that we get the funding, it's going to be a major change in the facades of one of our projects, Armstrong Court, which you all agree. And this is what we're proposing to go on right now. These will be the first of 18 units of townhouses at Armstrong Court, which will run along Hamilton Avenue. After we're going to go on picture Armstrong Court as you know it again. This is what you're going to be seeing when we're done with Armstrong Court. Okay? This will look nothing like Armstrong Court of yesteryear. Armstrong Court will look like, I was about to say, the gated community. Okay? Something that residents of the town of Greenwich live in Armstrong Court will be proud to say the residents of Armstrong Court. They come on the residents will be proud to say this is one of our public housing units. And this is something that, as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Selectman, Greenwich, we do a lot of good things in Armstrong. Hopefully, we can do right. I think a total of 4.
New units? No, 18
No,
in total.
18 new ones, but
12.
number overall.
In terms for Armstrong Court, it's 12.
12.
Because we're taking out 6 one-bedroom.
Each one will have, There will be 2 bathrooms there. As you can see, the balconies will be gone, so there won't be no storage out on those balconies. It'll be all living space now, so that'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Moving forward on some of the other projects.
One of the other things we want to have you consider again that we've talked about in the past was McKinney Terrace, the portion of McKinney Terrace that the Housing Authority has under lease from the town. To be able to really expand housing in the town of Greenwich, affordable housing, as it's shrinking, as you know, in town because of just pricing of things in town and the availability of units, we have to, at one point, get to redeveloping Quarry Knoll, which is our 50-unit public housing development. But because of the age...
Not to interrupt, but it's amazing when you talk about Quarry Knoll. When I first became, in 2009, I remember that was an issue. Even we're still talking, it's been like a long...
It is.
God,
We're gonna get it
10
done
years.
now.
No, I'm just saying, it's been so, yeah.
It's tough. I mean, the major reason that it hasn't been done
Has
is
to be.
really is finding somewhere to move the
Yeah.
50 families to.
Really has to
And
be.
that's why trying to reignite McKinney Terrace senior housing would be a primary purpose of building that housing so that we can actually have a location for
And once
the
again, the
50
issue, even
families.
back then, I remember, the issue is what we do with the current occupants of the homes, just to where they to move for the time being.
Yeah, we in order to move forward with
Yeah.
this next plan that we're going to talk about, we have to have a relocation plan.
Sure.
And this will allow us to do the relocation plan because we have further intent to take care of Quarry 1, which would be a real, I guess, how many units will we put in there?
We can do 176. We can actually do many more, but right now the plan is 176, which includes a lot of senior housing.
Yeah.
So this isn't consistent with the plan of development that was approved by the RTM, where it stated that we should look into current use of our underutilized properties and use them to their fullest extent, and that we should build, more senior housing closer to downtown area on bus routes and make it more accessible for seniors.
Yeah.
So we're going to be addressing the senior housing issue like it's never been addressed before in the town of Greenwich.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I think the issue is never, I mean, I think everyone would agree that Quarry Knoll has to be renovated. I think, so the issue is always just where to,
Where to put them. So the first stage in that would be this.
yeah.
This is the McKinney Terrace that we propose to put the senior housing there, and we would like to move the residents from Quarry Knoll into the new senior housing, and that would give us our relocation plan.
Sure.
So that's one phase. We have another one. You have it? Well, first of all, this is the layout of McKinney Terrace and how it would fit into the existing property. We're not losing the woods. That was a big concern of some of the residents, that we were going to take away all the green and we're going to destroy the area with woods. And no, it's going to fit in nicely. And I think, again, it fits into the conservation plan of development that the town of Greenwich has approved and the RTM has approved. And we're going to blend into the community, and it's not going to be intrusive, and it's not going to look ugly, because we pride ourselves on doing things right and doing them and keeping the community informed. So we don't want to come down like some of these developers do into a neighborhood and all of a sudden think that we're going to destroy your neighborhood. We're not going to destroy anybody's neighborhood. We want to be partners with the neighbors and do it in the right way. We want to include the residents. We want to take their input. If they have any suggestions of change and make it nicer, hey, we're all in favor of that, because we want to work hand in hand with our community, because we want to be good neighbors in the town of Greenwich. The other project, which I think we want to put in, this again is another senior building, and we might be able to put into a wellness clinic at the same time, like we have a wellness clinic now that we provide at Wilbur Peck for a walk-in community. So this would be a proposed senior building at Armstrong Court and land that we've tested extensively, and we'll do more testing again to put everybody's concerns to rest on contamination, because that's, quote, a touchy issue in the town, but we've done testing there already, so we know what we're getting into, but we'll revise it and redo it and test it again if we need be.
Is that down where the playground is?
No,
No.
it's actually behind it on Booth Court. So
This is down further, it runs parallel with Booth Court.
You're not going to take the community garden, are you?
No, that's on the opposite side. That's on the bakery side.
Just your section.
But this is something that, again, with the town plan of development telling us to utilize our underutilized properties, and we do have the room and the space to provide quality housing for our seniors. And you look at the demographics, I think the United Way has done an extensive study some years ago and said that, Greenwich is a graying community. And a lot of residents who have lived all their lives, contributed to the town of Greenwich, would like to stay here. But it becomes very difficult not to be able to find any affordable housing for seniors. And again, we're addressing the senior issue for the town of Greenwich and the residents. So I think this is another quality building that would fit nicely into the area, and it wouldn't be intrusive of anybody.
Sam, where is that in relation to, so that's not part of the revitalization?
No. This is new, completely brand new.
How is that different than what was initially proposed when we were talking about the senior, with the original project? We were talking about a senior project down on...
Oh, no, this is the same project, but we pulled it from that project because of funding issues, and it was a massive, and...
No, understood, but where is it? Is it in the same geographic location, or has it been moved?
It'll run parallel with Booth Place. So it's in the same area that we were originally going to do two projects moving forward at the same time, but it was a funding issue, so we withdrew it from the original plan that we went to planning and zoning with. And all we went forward with was with the project that has been approved by planning and zoning now. This is another project on property that is vacant, that's underutilized.
Going back to the McKinney Terrace, could you point out where the new units would be, please?
The new units actually would be this building here. These are existing buildings. This was a proposed addition to the existing senior building, which we're not talking about now. So this is existing. This would be the new building, which is on this dividing line is the dividing line between our leased space and the wooded area. So we're talking about posting the building right here.
Thank you. Thanks.
The other thing about this senior building that we're looking at, and Mr. Tona, you mentioned it earlier, we're also looking at, Alzheimer care as well in a facility like this, because we, as you know, we actually house people from birth to death in terms of services that the housing authority provides, but we don't have a facility that houses folks with dementia.
Alzheimer's.
And has that, high level of care that's needed. So that's one of the things we consider.
And we're also looking at doing some public-private partnerships. So, because in any project such as this and the things that we're undertaking, funding is always an issue. So we're looking at creative financial ways to get these things accomplished, not only with federal money or state money, but also public and private partnerships. So we're aggressively looking at the finances of these projects. We want to do what actually can come into reality and not just be putting it on the table so we can just talk about these things. We want to accomplish them. And I think looking at the last 5 years and then looking at the next 5 years, I think we have a pretty good proven track record of getting things accomplished. And I'm very excited about doing the things that we have done and what we'd like to do in the Housing Authority. And I just appreciate the support of the Board of Selectmen who have been supportive of the Housing Authority on many of our projects. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to serve the community in a different level than I have in the past years.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the handout.
One of the things I just would like to focus in on real quickly, just as you go through, if you look on the financial page, the Housing Authority actually receives 5 audits a year, 5 financial audits from different organizations because of our properties. On our unaudited financial statements, I would direct your attention to the average rents at the bottom of that page. For example, Agnes Morley, our average rent is $349 a month. Adams Garden is $992 a month. Armstrong Court, $759. Town Hall Annex, $459 a month. McKinney Terrace is a little higher, $1,121. McKinney Terrace 2, $601 a month. Wilbur Peck, $548. Quarry Knoll 1, $326. And Quarry Knoll 2, $464. So as you see, it's very difficult to operate any properties on these rents unless you do it very efficiently. And I think we've done a good job of doing that because you just can't do it any other way. And you have to remember that we don't get funding for state properties. The only funding that we receive are for the federal properties, and that's the shrinking pot of money. The other program I'd like you to take a look at is our resident services program. And the thing I would direct your attention to is our family self-sufficiency program. That's a program that's sponsored by HUD, but we actually run the program. What it does is that a family gets onto this program, and so their base rent is the rent that they are at when they are accepted into the program. As their rent goes up based on their income, because the rent is calculated based on their income, the delta between what they were paying and what they pay into the future is put into a savings account for them. So to date, the Housing Authority has spent given back to the residents $182,000 for education for their children, new cars, whatever they can utilize to improve their economic self-sufficiency, which we think is a wonderful thing. And then the Housing Authority actually funds through our Board of Directors, our Board of Commissioners, 17, we raised it again, how many are we up to now? 16 scholarships of $1,000 each, 8 to high school students, and the other 8 to continuing college-educated kids, or kids who are in college. And that's all I wanted to point out there.
One other thing I'd like to bring up. There's going to be some, in the near future, I don't know exactly when, but some money that's going to be coming back from the Housing Authority to Community Block Grant through a negotiated settlement and sale of some properties that were originally some years ago designated for affordable housing, and through different measures, the people who are living in now are buying them outright. So that money is going to be coming back to the Community Block Grant, and we would hope that we could, have due consideration when that money is returned back to the Community Block Grant, that we can reprogram that money back into affordable housing and some other housing needs for the low and moderate income people in the town of Greenwich. So I just hope you can keep that in mind when that money does come back.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sam, Terry, and all of the folks on the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners for your work, your advancement of improvements to supported housing in Greenwich. We're very thankful for your efforts.
Thank you.
And we thank you for your support.
Sam, thank you. Tony, thank you.
Okay, we have 4 more items on the agenda. I know, Mr. Foster, you've been here from the inception and you have a relatively routine item. I would make a motion just to take this up before we hear from Ms. Elliott and Ms. Savageau, because he's an external client of our, Yes, and
Fantastic, good. Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question in regards to, you shared with me, in regards to the, doesn't pertain to, I mean, it doesn't, but to the BOC vote in regards to Steamboat, how, in that pier, just to share with us what that, if it, I'm just curious, if it, because of the BOC vote, I'm not going to predetermine the RTM vote, but if they don't fund that, how does that affect pretty much the whole project and everything? Like, what's going to happen? I mean, do we have any idea? I mean,
I would not like to supersede in my comments what I think the RTM is going to do, but I do think that if well-intended people, thoughtful people, look at the facts surrounding the piece of infrastructure and recognize that, I haven't heard anybody say not fix it. They may not like.
oh, that wasn't the vote?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry,
What
the vote.
happens there?
But just to clear for John, the vote in the BOC yesterday was to not fund, like, it means
I'm
not
hearing that.
fixing-
I'm hearing that from someone who was there. Was that correct, Mr.?
Right, the majority of the BOC voted to leave the $600,000 worth of funding. The dialogue that preceded it was more, to be complete with you, was more in the nature of reducing it. There was conversation of reducing it by $350 at one point and by $250, all of which seemed to be under a supposition that I don't know what the factual basis for it was, that this would be enough to fix it, but wouldn't be enough to develop it for this use or that use. Then, as more voices said, you've heard nothing of the kind from the Department of Public Works, then a motion appeared to then simply strike it all together, and that motion passed by a majority but not unanimous last night. I didn't bring my notes with me, so I can't tell you.
Which means, Mr. First Selectman, if that were the case, and say, I'm not, like I said, don't know how the vote's going to turn out in a week or two. If there's no funding, is that because of liability? What happens? I mean, are people no longer going to be, at some point, it has to be fixed or corrected, right?
I totally agree. It does have to be fixed.
So what
But
will
so in the interim
happen?
period, Commissioner Siebert has to respond to information she has in consulting with legal that now we are now on record. We have a outside risk assessment expressing poor condition. In fact, it's not on our agenda, so I don't want to get too much into it because I don't think it's appropriate, but it begs the question because it's
What's
a
gonna-
prominent. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us
But could there be, what I'm
to
getting at is-
support it being repaired. And I think we should be getting people to come and speak at the districts because talk about, again, coming 360 about some of the positive things we heard about today, about the seniors and the age-friendly community and all the positive work of the housing are here. Then you have a negative action on not repairing what is one of the more visible and prominent aspects of our community. What does that say? And I think they need to think beyond the scope of the infrastructure. I think people are too caught in the weeds.
I need to know if it's not fixed, there's a real possibility that it could be closed down. Am I hearing that correctly?
Well, it's not it's being closed because there's a risk exposure.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So they're either going to have to fix it, or at some point it's going to have to close. I mean, is that ultimately what I'm hearing?
I would hope that the community pressure would be so strong that people would recognize the realities that it has to be fixed.
Thanks, Steve.
So
Entertain a further remark from me?
I really don't want to get in jeopardy of compromising
Right,
our
sorry.
agenda
I brought it up,
any
I'm
more
sorry.
than,
Sorry.
Fair enough.
but I do thank you for your advocacy for, I know that you are a staunch proponent of repairing it, so thank you.
And I thank you for, I brought that up, not you. Sorry about that.
So what I wanted to do is,
Back to
because Mr.
flagpoles.
Foster has a business to run, and he's been very patient as a citizen here, but he has a simple request. So could we make a motion quickly to take up his item in advance so we can just address it?
Second is,
Without objection. So we
Mr. Foster.
we received a request from the Indian Harbor Yacht Club, for which Mr. Foster is the general manager. Do I have the right title? They are looking to replace their flagpole as part of their overall major capital improvements. In order to do so, they're going to have some equipment putting in the foundation in the pole at the location, and they need a temporary road closure to install, in order to reinstall a new flagpole. It did go to the chief of police. He did grant that on Thursday, May 4th. It came here in light of all the, and I'll begin, in light of all the discussion about that geographic area, I didn't think it was a good idea just to do it administratively, because people would see activity down there, and they say, well, what's going on? So we're being very forthright and open, and we want you to fly a flag, so.
How do you vote against a flag here?
So,
Mr. Foster?
I will move
This is a
to.
no-brainer here.
Grant the temporary road closure on May 4th for purposes of reinstallation. Thursday, yep. Thursday, May 4th. It'll be there for Cinco de Mayo. So, do we get approval?
We do, yes.
Okay. All set.
Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Who seconded the motion?
True.
True.
Thank you.
We waited for 2 hours of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Miss Elliott, thank you very much for your indulgence. We have with us today our Town Assessor, Lauren Elliott, and she's going to speak to us about the 2020 property tax valuation.
Yes, thank you for taking the time this morning. As I've been asked over my tenure here in the town of Greenwich how we can save some money and implement procedures that will help us do so. And so what I'm proposing that we do is to start the 2020 revaluation sooner rather than later. And what's the requirement of the revaluation in 2020 is going to be that we actually walk around every single property. And we have an obligation under the statutes 12-62 for an inspection of each property to be done once every 10 years. Every property. Commercial and residential. There is a different requirement for condominiums because they are declared on the land records, and to measure them as a complex, that's a different scenario. But we review those in a separate way. So we're talking mostly at this point in time about single-family homes. Well, here's how it works. So the idea and the proposal is that if we have about 15,000 single-family homes, multifamily homes. If we actually start measuring and listing these houses over the next few years, we'll have to do about 3,000 or 4,000 a year. The other option is that we wait until 2020, we put this out to bid with a revaluation company, and then they charge us to walk around every single home within that 2-year period. The last time you did it that way, it cost you in excess of over $4 million. You did that back in 2001. You hired Tyler Technologies to come in here and measure and list all the properties here in the town of Greenwich. It exceeded $4 million. Okay. I wasn't here in 2020. I mean, 2000. I'm not quite sure. But that's basically the procedures that had been. That's the way most municipalities did it in the past. Now that we have all these camera system and technologies, we don't necessarily have to do it the same way we've done it in the past. So what I'm proposing is that we start measuring and listing houses about a third, and a third over the next 3 summers. And just the single-family homes. What I mean by measure and listing, so basically what that would require is we have 3 residential appraisers. It would require us to hire a couple outside people during the nice weather. We go out to a property, we knock on the door. If somebody is home, we ask to get in. They don't have to let us. If they let us in, we take a quick tour of the inside of the house, and then we just walk around the outside of the home and verify the measurements and the data that we have about each property. We do that already now that with building permits. So when somebody pulls a building permit, say for instance they pulled a building permit on a detached garage, we go out and we measure that garage. While my residential appraisers are there, they also ask permission to verify the information that we have about all the other structures on the property. So in doing so, we have already taken about 5,000 properties off of our measure and list requirement that we've done since October 1st, 2010. You following me? Okay, so we've already measured and listed about 4,000 or 5,000 of these properties through a building permit. Somebody pulled a building permit, we're allowed to go out there, and we've then measured the entire property, not just the... Right. So now we have about 10,000 or so to do over the course between now and 2020. So if we can do about a third of these every summer, we're not going to spend and be under that timeline of measuring these all in 1 or 2 summers if we hire a revaluation company. So what I'm proposing, and the reason why I'm here today, is to start putting out press releases and have the townspeople of Greenwich understand that somebody from the assessor's office may be out there and knocking on your door. And if so, we'll have identification Their cars, or they'll be in town cars, or if not in a town car, their registrations, what have you, will be with the police department. We did a lot of this for the last, with the 2015 revaluation. We had a lot of field checks that we had to do, and we had very little issues about it. We had, some complaints, but certainly more inquiries than anything. So what I'm proposing is to start doing this summer, is to start going out there and start walking around the properties and measuring, listing, and all we're trying to do is just verify the data that we have about the property.
Lauren, is there an advantage to the homeowner if they have access inside the home or no?
Yes. I mean, basically, if we've seen it, we actually know. It's interesting because people come in and they always complain about their assessment. Well, my house is awful. I'm like, well, you need to let us in. If it's not upgraded, if it's not modernized, they need us. We need to get in to see it. We won't. This effect won't happen until the 20 revaluation. The only thing that we would pick up at this point in time is just if we were missing something. In other words, if we went to a property and we found that they built a garage or there was a wood deck off the back, which we have not been assessing, we would certainly add that. But the information that we're collecting now is not going to be used until the 2020 revaluation, as far as condition or change. If there's a specific data error, that we will make the change. If there is something about the condition or what have you of that property, that change ultimately would not happen until the next revaluation. Okay?
Great. I applaud you for your diligence in anticipating the need and employing resources. I think you've continually demonstrate your superb effectiveness in the role, and not an easy one.
No, thank you. So I would like to present, or I'd like to start putting these press releases out there, and I'd like to start having our people, have our people out there and have the town have an understanding that we're always going to have people from the assessor's office out in the field. That's where that's where they belong. That's what they need to do. They need to be walking around properties.
Your peeps.
Yes,
So-
my peeps.
So this was an excellent opportunity to educate us about what you're doing, and also you'll be sending this out today?
Well, today, or maybe, might give us a reprieve, maybe next week.
Certainly a good vehicle
Okay.
is a good vehicle for you to help, particularly with our older residents, is the Commission on Aging, to perhaps make sure they get this and talk it up with their census of population, because, they're
They're
very security
about,
conscious
yes.
about people coming to their door.
Yes. We're not going to advertise where we're going to be. We don't want to give anybody else the opportunity to go out there.
That's smart.
So we're going to be it's going to be, for the most part, it will be town employees that will be doing this.
Great. Well, thank you very much
Lauren,
again.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
$1 million change.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is water restrictions update. And Denise and I have been talking water for quite some time.
I guess I can still say good morning. That's right, that's right. Okay, so my name's Denise Savage. I'm the Conservation Director for the town of Greenwich, and wanted to give you an update about where we are, and I had given you quite an extensive discussion at, I think, a couple of meetings ago, and about where we were and where we're headed as a town and as a region, and actually as a state in terms of water supply. So there's a couple of things that in your packet that we're going to be going through. One is there's a memo to you explaining where we are and how we're, what we need to be doing, and actually the resolution that I'm going to be proposing that you pass today. There's a little blurb that I had done for the Northeast Greenwich Association called Water Conservation: A Path to Resiliency, and I'll talk a little bit more about that There's a couple of charts on rainfall data and also on the Connecticut Drought Monitor. And lastly, in your packet is a handout that Aquarion has been working with UConn, and UConn's in the process of developing some educational programs, and that kind of ties into that whole idea of a path to resiliency. So right now where we are is that as you know, we've been under a mandatory water emergency since September of 2016. We kept the ban on all winter long, and March 9th, we changed that from a total ban on outdoor watering, and we had it focused on outdoor irrigation. And we've been working very closely with the 4 towns, the Department of Public Health, and Aquarion. And Aquarion has done an amazing job bringing in consultants from across the country. We had a program from some folks in Dallas and some of the programs they're looking at, and basically talking about our next steps as we start phasing out of the drought. And that has to do with the 2-day irrigation. But I want to just go over a couple of things before, so that you understand where we are, because it's raining, and it's been raining all week, and I think probably most people are going to say, Denise, stop asking for rain, including myself. I'd love to have a couple of sunny days with my grandkids coming for the weekend. But certainly, people look outside, or they look at the reservoir levels, and they say, we must be out of the drought. So I just want to go over a couple of things. And so if you could pull up the charts, I just want to go over a couple of things so that you understand where we are and why we're not just totally lifting all of the ban and why we're talking about water restrictions. So the chart here that has the rainfall data, and this is as of April 1st, and we have had some good rainfall in April. But basically what this chart was saying is that we're still in a 12-inch deficit of rainfall. So over the last 365 days, you'll see we're in a 12-inch deficit. The prior month, when I came to you in March, we had seen that there was a 14-inch deficit. So slowly we're catching up, and obviously the rainfall we had in April is going to go away and bringing this down. And my guess is, and I don't have the data because we're not finished with April yet, but my guess as of May 1st, we're probably going to be in an 8 to 9-inch deficit. We'll see. I'm not really sure. Maybe it's going to be 9 to 10. We'll see what that comes out with in terms of the exact deficit. So we're slowly eating away at that rainfall deficit, but we are still in a deficit. And the next two graphs on the next page are from the USGS, and these are stream flow gauges. And this kind of shows you exactly what's going on. And the gauge at the top of the page is the Byram River. The interesting thing about this gauge, and why I'm showing you 2 gauges, is this gauge was only put in, so I only have statistics on that gauge for the past 7 years. And we've been in several droughts over the past 7 years. So if you look at the little triangles, that's average base flow for the same time of year. So when we're looking at that, it's saying as of March 4th, the little diamonds are showing you what the average base flow is, and the blue line is showing you what the actual water running in the Byram River was this year. So you can see we had a lot of rain at the end of March and early April. It went up, and then it came back down to average. But one of the things is I'm a little bit concerned about those average base flows. Again, I only have 7 years of statistics. So if you look at, and I think that this is quite telling, if you look at the chart below, it's showing you the Mill River in Fairfield, Connecticut. And that has 44 years of data. So 44 years of looking at that. And you can see that the river was running below the base flow, which is the triangles, and the blue is the actual. They had the rain just like we did in March and April. The hydrograph shows that the river was up. But as soon as that rain stopped at the beginning of April, we went right down below base flow. That means that the runoff went down, but then we're not getting that recharge from groundwater, because that's what maintains base flow in streams, and that's the type of thing that we're really looking at and why we're having experienced dry conditions. And the anecdotal evidence we have for those of us who are out in the woods looking at vernal pools and whatever, the vernal pools all filled up in the end of March, beginning of April. We were all doing our happy dance for the vernal pools, and the critters who live in the woods, and then shortly realized within a week or so that, you know what, it's pretty dry in the woods, and they actually had some fire danger and fire alerts out across the state. So I wanted to point this out, that we have this rainfall, but we really want to, and that's where that rainfall deficit is coming in, that we want to be able to maintain base flows, and that's why the idea is that you don't go from a drought to no drought. And it's the same thing. You don't go from having regular conditions to a drought. Droughts slowly creep up, and then they slowly go down, and that's the way we need to look at water restrictions. And it's one of the things that we want to do in terms of water conservation, making our community more resilient, so that we don't all of a sudden have to say, like, go from, everybody can use as much water as they want to using no water. And the same thing when we go out. We want to kind of smooth out that curve and how we're having people use water. The other thing I just want to show you so you understand where we are is you have something called the drought monitor. And this is conditions today, April 25th. Or actually, I said as of Thursday. Yeah, no, as of this morning, I guess. It just was released. So the 25th would have been, so it's released for the Thursday, the 27th, but this is for they release it for the week. So everything in yellow is basically saying we're abnormally dry, and that's what we're saying. You kind of step down from moderate drought. We were in extreme drought in the fall, and we've slowly, with the rainfall over the past several weeks and month, been moving from moderate drought to abnormally dry. But it's April, and we're abnormally dry. Not a good thing. And I just want to, if you turn the page, this is conditions in the state of Connecticut, April 26, 2016. The state wasn't even showing as a drought. It was basically showing we were in same conditions now, abnormally dry. So what I just want to point out is that, a lot of people saying there's a lot of rain and whatever. So we're looking at all of these indicators that we can slowly go from this abnormally dry to drought conditions. So one of the things we've been working on, and this is why we're looking at lifting the ban on outdoor irrigation, but going to a 2-day a week, and looking at doing that permanently. And the reason is we want to really flatten out that demand curve. We have a situation where we go from 8 million, 10 million gallons a day in the winter to 25 or 32 million gallons a day in the summer. That it just is not sustainable. And particularly for the backcountry, those served on private wells, we did a USGS study that basically said we are pumping more water out of the ground than is being recharged on an annual basis, and that is not sustainable. So we really want to look at that. I've been invited to the Round Hill Association meeting. I spoke at Round Hill. I spoke with the Northeast Greenwich Association, and Caroline Baisley did. I spoke with the Northwest Greenwich Association. All of our backcountry associations are very, very concerned about wells and what we can do, and we're actually looking at having a bigger program just on folks who are on wells so they understand, what the conditions are and what we want to do moving forward. Again, looking at that USGS study, and one of the things I've proposed not only for our town but the 4 towns is that we work with USGS and get that study updated for the 4 towns. So what we're proposing, and this has to do, Aquarion's doing the same thing. So Aquarion, under the PURA regulations, will be implementing a 2-day-a-week water restrictions. And that has to do with basically, allowing people to do whatever irrigation they need to do with the outdoor sprinklers 2 days a week based on their, whether they're based on their addresses, so it's easy for them to enforce. The good thing for the town with Aquarion taking these steps is that sometimes when we go into water restrictions, the town is responsible for the enforcement, but for Aquarion customers, they will be doing some of the enforcement. That said, the town has legal other legal authorities that we can put in place so that we can piggyback on what they're doing, not only for the people on public supply, but for the people on private wells, because Aquarian doesn't cover private wells. Now, the State Department of Public Health had a meeting yesterday when we had, and Peter alluded to this earlier, they're going to be probably lifting the emergency water supply ban that they have in place, order that they've issued, and come in with an emergency supply authorization that will be looking at this 2-day-a-week and encouraging the 2-day-a-week program on both public and private water supplies. So that would be the private wells. So we're anticipating that will be forthcoming from the Department of Public Health, and they have until May 1st. The order that they have in place is as of May 1st, and so we're looking over the next 2 days that they will be getting us something new. That said, the town, our order is in place until you guys change it. So as of March, you put on an order March 9th, banning all outdoor irrigation. So my recommendation is that we lift that and replace it with the information and back that I presented to you. So the first page kind of gets into the rationale, including the other information I've provided to you, and then the second and third page basically is the ordinance that will, the resolution that I would be asking you to pass, and this would be moving forward what we would have in place for our town.
Denise, could you explain for public edification? So while we're talking, you and I with the four towns, each town has a little bit different mechanism. Ours, you were explaining yesterday, and I think it's important for people to understand, is fairly robust in our ability to adapt to these changing circumstances in terms of ordinance and regulation versus Darien or New Canaan. So that's one point. Two, you were alluding to the State Department of Public Health Water Bureau. That's important. I think it needs to be stated again and again that if they come forward with this authorization, it synchronizes the towns all under one umbrella, so that when we point to why are we doing this, we in Greenwich have an ordinance and we're rock solid with our ordinance. The other towns don't. It gives greater strength to the overall objective and initiative to conserve the resource. So if you could.
Yeah. So quickly, Greenwich's history is that we have had some challenges with water supply. This isn't our first rodeo here. We've been here, and in the 1980s, early 1980s, there was there was quite a drought. Well, actually, the 1960s, and then in the 80s again. I believe it was in the 80s that they put on the drought restrictions, and the town adopted the ordinance, and we were really the first town in the state of Connecticut to adopt an ordinance. Stanford is one of the other only communities that also has an ordinance, and they adopted, I don't know time frame if it was shortly after us or if it was one of the droughts that followed, because we've had a series of droughts. We had some in the 80s. Then when I got here, I've been here almost 20 years now. Will be my 20th anniversary in November, and I've had to put on drought restrictions probably 7 or 8 times, and that's a lot. That's almost every other year or every 2.5 years, and that's and sometimes it's only been getting into voluntary and not as severe as this has been the severest that I've been involved in, but we've had a couple others that were pretty severe. So that's a lot, and I think that's one of the things. It's like, okay, we cannot keep just responding to the emergency. We need to plan for the emergency. So we do have the ordinance in place, and I think it sets us apart from the other towns. Like I said, we're one of the few towns in Connecticut, and actually the Department of Public Health looks to our guidance because they understand that Greenwich is one of the is actually, if you will, almost the town that has the ordinance and has the stuff in place. And I have to say, I wasn't here when it was first put in place. Caroline Baisley, who couldn't be here today because they had a big meeting, all the health departments across the state are having a big meeting today. But our health department and our health director really understand this, and they have their own ordinances that control water supply as well. So what you're doing today is under Article 5, under water shortages in the town of Greenwich ordinances, we are enacting that ordinance, and we're basically, again, what I'm saying is we put on basically a lot of restrictions, and now we're phasing down, and we're going into the 2-day per week water supply, because we don't want to get into the middle of this summer and say, didn't we learn anything from last year where we just let people use as much water as they want without managing this? We've talked to all of the experts, and you have the information that the fact sheet UConn has been putting together. But basically, all the experts, and as you know, Bill Rutherford is a landscape architect. He's the chairman of the Conservation Commission. I've been running all this information by him as an expert in plants and landscaping or whatever. We really do not need people to water their lawns more than twice a week. So so it's not like we're taking away that they can't water their lawns. We're basically saying twice a week. We do have provisions in here that there will be an exception, obviously, for nursery crops and commercial operations. They will, they're not going to be under this. And then golf courses and athletic fields, we know that they have to be handled separately. They're still going to be covered by this, but we'll be looking at how we do a variance with them and working that out with Aquarion and as to how we handle the golf courses and how we handle how we handle athletic fields. And that has to do with if a golf course, for example, was looking at watering on a Saturday or Sunday, that may not be a good thing for them because that might be the business. And we really just need them to be looking at how do they manage their golf course, and can they, reduce their water use by 10% or 15%. They just manage in a whole different way than the average homeowner or business with just, a lawn in the front of the business handles things. And then similarly, we were looking at the athletic fields. There are times when they have an intensive use, we may need to, but if it's a field that doesn't get used in the summer, maybe they don't have to manage as intensively in the summer. So we need to really look at how they get managed and whatever. And there are some provisions for, have we thought of every exception? Probably not. We do know that there's some challenges for large estates where if they have 10 acres of lawn, can they manage it all in one day or whatever? And Aquarion has a program in place to manage variances that way. So we're trying to make sure that we're working very closely. We've been meeting. I've met several times. Aquarion has been holding meetings with the irrigation folks. We had a meeting actually on Tuesday before the meeting yesterday with Aquarion and the Department of Public Health and the other towns. We met with the irrigation folks and explained to them what we need to do. Part of this effort, and the reason I wanted to give you the information on the path to resiliency is, if I just come here and ask you to do this and we're not doing anything else, but the Conservation Commission is looking at this being as well as, and I have to say, Caroline is such a great partner with the Department of Health, really moving into educating the community. We need to institutionalize water conservation.
Made such a difference.
Yeah, we need to treat it the way we treat recycling, and I think that's the best analogy. Everybody just recycles; they know that's the right thing to do, and we have it in place. We need to be treating water conservation the same way, And I think what happens that way is it's just easier to manage people's expectations, and also it's a matter of then they can plan appropriately. So, and we'll be looking at long-term right now, because we are still abnormally dry. We're doing this under our water shortage ordinance, and we're going to be looking at how do we implement something long-term, what changes might we need to make in terms of any ordinances, most likely through the Board of Health, to make sure that we do the water conservation year-round. And that's actually happening at the state level as well. The State Department of Public Health is also looking at saying, is there something we need to do statewide to basically, because there was a lot of focus. Statewide, it was like, okay, you're either using water or you're in a drought. And there was kind of this just doing water conservation all the time. And that it's kind of the new reality that we really need to do that. And so that's where we're moving forward. So if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy. But my recommendation, I'm speaking for my colleague, Caroline Baisley, she has reviewed these, and Michael Long was in attendance yesterday, and we are looking to pass this resolution.
Great. Again, Denise, thank you. I think it's been an extraordinary initiative and effective initiative in terms of the numbers that have declined due to the effort. So thank you. At this time, I would move the following resolution. In order to protect the drinking water supplies and provide for adequate fire protection, the following drought response measures are adopted by the Board of Selectmen at a meeting today, April 27th, and apply to all public and private water supplies, including private wells, effective May 1st, 2017. These restrictions replace those adopted on March 9th, 2017, and recognizes both the improvement in water supply conditions and the need to move water conservation measures aimed at avoiding another water supply emergency. And this resolution is in accordance with Town Ordinance Article 5, water shortages, and as enumerated in the document for consideration and approval today. Second. So moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you again. So this effectively lists
Come back
the
soon.
water irrigation ban and institutes a 2-day-a-week watering schedule, which incorporates alternating for even residences, even number residences and odd number residences, and that will be publicized.
And enforced.
And enforced through Aquarian. I mean, they've developed fairly elaborate mailing materials. They're going to have a billboard, a mobile billboard running around town. We need to talk with them about the signs, those, what do you call them, Melissa, those automated? Yeah, variable message signs.
Say it with a smile.
So, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
This was in my folder.
Oh, actually, yeah, that's,
Oh.
Those were those
Sorry,
two
I got-
hazard mitigation grants.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that.
I signed, and I think they witnessed.
All right.
Okay,
That's what
so,
I get for putting my phone, it's like I, in my brief.
Last but not least.
so the next item,
Oh, you're not last?
the next item is a speed limit request for Old Stone Bridge Road, and with us, we have our traffic operations coordinator, Melissa Evans.
I'm going to bring gold stars for you. Every time you get it right, we give you one.
To be honest, they wrote it on the agenda.
Oh, see, that's cheating.
So we're talking about Old Stone Bridge. Probably the most expeditious item on the agenda today, next to the flagpole.
That's right, watch this. This will be real quick. That's why I'm glad that I didn't have to wait around for my 5 minutes of fame here. If that.
1 minute. Come on, let's go.
If that.
Approve, let's go.
So the engineering division was contacted by Janet McMahon, who, to her credit, is here today and has witnessed all of the rest of the agenda, waiting for her item.
She deserves the gold star.
Yes, she does. She definitely does.
Jeff gets one every day.
She contacted us on behalf of their association over on Old Stone Bridge Road with concerns about the traffic through there and the speed. We did our investigation as we do, and we recorded some traffic counts. The 85th percentile speed was 33.
Nice comments.
33 is a little high for a residential neighborhood that has 5 bus stops on the street, a lot of walkers through the neighborhood. The data shows that it's a lot of cut-through traffic, people who are just going from Cat Rock to Cognywog and vice versa. So we are recommending a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit be established.
No.
And and as a side note, it's not anything that you have to approve, but I always like to just let you folks know, I did put in a request to the Highway Division to put up some bus stop ahead signs as well, just to give people, information that the street
You mean
has.
school bus stops?
Yes.
It's a catalog. Do you know?
And that's the gist.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. McMahon, thank you for your patience.
Thank you for adding me to the agenda, and I do hope that this is passed by the state.
Yes.
Yes, the cause very near and dear to my heart, as, being a
I think
small
you're-
kid, so, whenever we go out to the bus stop, I always have to grab them by the arm.
And geese.
Kind of
You're a
wrestle them.
testament to citizen activism, and
Thank you.
thank you very much.
For staying for so long. Thank you very much.
Perhaps we've recruited you to join Greenwich government, RTM,
BOE.
BET, Board of Selectmen.
Board of Education.
Mr. Raymer is here. I don't want to give his identity, but
Democratic Party.
I would have to give it an alternating point of view.
Well, either party.
Melissa, do they need to vote on this or not?
Yes.
They do.
So I'll make a motion to approve the recommended speed limit to be established and posted for Old Stone Bridge, 25 miles an hour, along with the accompanying signage as recommended,
Thank you.
without objection. Thank you so much again, and we'll,
Signatures, please.
Come again, Melissa.
do you have a pen? Right here.
I know you miss me when I don't come.
I do. I do miss you here.
Here's blue.
Up a- Yes, yeah.
And then when I prepare the state
I know,
form.
I know.
No,
Okay.
this goes back to Melissa,
Okay.
not me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes items under new business. Do we have any appointments and nominations? There's only one that I'm aware of, and that is for the Alarms Appeals Board. We did have a resignation of Jim Dane, and I did express to Jim our appreciation and gratitude for his service. He had to step down due to personal circumstances and illness, and so our heart goes out to him and thank him for his service. Let's find the spreadsheet. The term, I believe, expires in 2018, and it's, so we would be filling that. The individual who has stepped forward is Joe Havranek. Joe is a retired police officer, resides in town, and brings a different perspective to the appeals board. We've been populated with retired firemen or fire-related people, and so we thought it was very judicious to have those who deal with the security alarms, or has that perspective. So I would move to nominate Joe Havranek to fill the term being vacated by Jim Dane for 2018?
2018.
This, SNAC has it as 2020, but I know that that says.
Right.
Okay, is there a second?
There is.
Second, discussion?
Enthusiastically. It's a good guy.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I can tell you, I acted on the only entity that I'm able to appoint unilaterally, which is the conservation, so reappointed Erling Searle, Sue Baker, Skip Parker, although it's Jefferson Skip Parker. We have two Parkers, so it's Jeff Parker, but he goes by Skip. And there's one more. And Gary Silberberg. And I believe there's one vacancy to be filled on there.
Okay. Happy Arbor Day.
So, what? I'm a kind person.
I have an interview for the new deputy assessor. By my sitting here,
I was
Oh, you shouldn't have told us that. We just thought you wanted to be
Listen,
here.
despite one of your titles, we still embrace you. I embrace you, and I like to see you because you provide us tremendous information. And that, I really am thankful.
Jeff is.
interest, anyway.
Do we have any items for executive session today? No. Wow, that's a first in a long
It is
time.
a first
That's great.
in 13 months.
Does that mean that we have no lawsuits against the town of Greenwich?
Jeff's handling them all. With that being said, let's not get in trouble. Let's make a motion to adjourn. Okay, without objection.